Your father was a kind of a saint. Your mom kind of scared me a little bit. She looked at me and I could tell she knows you're up to no good.
I see Dad working so hard and Mom just letting it flow.
When you tell it, it's not funny, and if I tell it...
That is a look at Stiller and Meara, Nothing is Lost. The documentary is directed by award-winning actor Ben Stiller, where he tells the story of his parents, comedy icons Jerry Stiller and Anne Meara, all the time exploring their impact on pop culture and at home. Ben Stiller joins us now. Ben, welcome to the morning show here in Canada.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, now Jerry and Anne, they were not only your parents, but obviously comedy legends that audiences adored. What did you want to highlight in this documentary that maybe people didn't know about them?
Well, it's interesting because I think when you're an actor, people have a certain sort of impression of you based on something that they've seen that's probably like the most popular thing you've done. And people know my dad probably from Seinfeld and King of Queens, or my mom from work that she had done on different television shows, or them as younger actors trying to find their way as a couple in the 50s who were kind of had no background in show business and evolved into this comedy team that people knew, for me, was a really interesting part of the story. And then, of course, just them as people and the relationships in our family that evolved in terms of how that affected me, and then in turn affected my kids, that generational effect that your parents have so much influence over you on. I think that was a big part of what I wanted people to see, too.
And Ben, also curious to know, when you were growing up, was there a specific moment for you when you realized that your parents were actually famous?
I'm trying to think of that, really that moment, because it was always around us. It was always part of our lives. It was just sort of something we took for granted, honestly, like to watch them on television as little kids. They go out and do a show and we'd watch at home with our housekeeper who was taking care of us, or if they were doing something live. It was exciting and fun to us, but it wasn't something that we thought was different. It was just sort of what my parents did. And yeah, kids in school had parents who were doctors and lawyers and mailmen and all those things. But it didn't. That was more fascinating to me, honestly, than the show business aspect of it, because that was like real life, and it was like, oh, that's really different than what my parents do. And that was always interesting to me.
All right, in doing this documentary, tell me about going through some of the footage for this project. What was it like for you to go back and look at this as a filmmaker rather than a son?
Well, it was sort of hard to differentiate, honestly, because you can't help but get caught up in when you're watching something, whether if it's a home movie, you're sent back to that time. Sometimes, it's that question of like, is the memory actually a memory, or is it are you remembering what you're seeing in the footage? But those home movies are so valuable to me because it's sort of like this, kind of like these, archaeological artifacts of your past. So for me, it was hard to differentiate because sometimes it would get emotional because you get wrapped up in watching your parents, but then ultimately it was like, well, we have to figure out how to make this a movie that, will have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a story that people can connect with. So it was different phases of that. And at first it was overwhelming and was very emotional. And then it kind of became more like, okay, well, how do we actually tell this story? And then it became emotional again, later on. So kind of like all different phases.
And what a story this is. Ben, it's good to see you. Congratulations on this project. And thanks so much for joining us here on TMS.
Thank you. Great talking to you. Thank you.
And Stiller and Meara, Nothing is Lost is out now.